Hello, and welcome to this live Food Co-op Initiative webinar, DataBasics, Data Needs for Startup Co-ops. We created this webinar actually because we've gotten lots of questions from you all about managing your data as startups, and we reached out to some experts today to fill in this gap in our knowledge and ability to support you. Joining us today are Joel Brock and John Purdy of the Tech Support Cooperative, and they're going to be walking us through this topic today with a lot more expertise than the FCI team can on how to manage your data as a startup food co-op. Before we begin, just a little bit about Food Co-op Initiative. We are a national nonprofit organization that only supports startup food co-ops. That's everything we do, and we've been doing it for 10 years now. We're celebrating our 10th year. In that 10 years, we've helped 130 food co-ops to open, and we are currently still supporting another 120 communities from Sitka, Alaska to Boston, Massachusetts that are working on starting their own food co-ops in their communities. So we exist just to support those startup food co-ops at all stages of development. Whether you're just starting to think about the possibility of a food co-op for your community or you're soon to open your doors, we can help. Our phone number is there on the screen as well as our email. We'd love to hear from you. And think about signing up for our mailing list and taking a look at our extensive resources at our website, www.foodcoopinitiative.coop. All of our resources are free to you. We'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsors who make it possible for these resources to be free to the startup food co-op community. Our thanks go out to the USDA, Blooming Prairie Foundation, the National Cooperative Grocers, the National Cooperative Bank, the Cooperative Foundation, the Cooperative Fund of New England, and dozens of mature food co-ops all over the United States. Thank you so much for making this work we do possible. All right, well, without much more ado, I am going to turn this over to Joel and John, and we're going to delve into data basics for startups. Take it away, guys.
Thanks, Jacqueline. My name is Joel Brock. I'm a member owner of the Tech Support Cooperative, and John Purdy is my co-presenter today, also with the Tech Support Cooperative. Say hi, John.
Hello, everybody.
Great. Thanks for joining us for this really important topic about data and your startup food cooperative. We are going to start today. There we are. We are going to start today with a quick overview of what we hope to cover. This is a really broad topic that encompasses a lot, and we're going to try and scope that a little bit and keep it focused and hopefully therefore make it useful. But our focus is member data and kind of everything that is correlated with that, equity, outreach, that sort of stuff. So our overview is just, we're going to do a quick intro and maybe hopefully introduce some terms and make sure we're on the same page with what we're talking about, and then go through the basics, when to consider these various tools, specifically what kinds of data to track, how to track it, meaning who are we working with to help us build the tools, and then of course the really juicy one, which is which tools should we be looking at, and pros and cons, and then of course how in the world do I choose among these many options. And of course at the end we'll have some time for Q&A.
And it's important to think about this as a responsive and growing process for your co-op. What decisions you make at the early stages of development might be different than the decisions you would make in a later stage of development. And it's important to remain flexible and reconsider these different key questions as your co-op grows and matures.
Great point, John. Yeah, these tools will grow and evolve with your co-op for sure, and we'll be talking about how to plan for that as well. Really quick, I just wanted to talk about some of these terms. Member management is something that we'll talk a lot about, and of course, that's pretty broad. We're just talking about, what is essentially your contact list, where we're going to record all of the members that are pouring into your co-op and giving you their money as equity. CRM is something that will come up a lot, and you may see it in your own research. And CRM, if you haven't encountered it before, originally it stood for Constituent Relationship Manager. This grew out of the world of political organizing and fundraising. It has since expanded to be Customer Relationship Manager. I like to call it the Cooperative Relationship Manager. Whatever C you like to use, but it's sort of how you track all the different ways that you've been in contact with individuals, organizations, etc. Payments are another component that we'll touch on, and we'll be looking at a couple of tools that integrate payment. So we may talk about like a payment gateway, for example, which is just a way for money to get from the internet into your bank account. And so that's a really important piece of the puzzle as well. And what are any other kind of key terms I'm missing here, John?
I don't think so. What we'll see is that with some of these services and approaches, you're able to do more or less related tasks like marketing outreach or fundraising efforts, or just kind of keeping track of different things depending on what approach you take.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive in. We got a little bit of a disclaimer, or sort of a, just not even a disclaimer, but I've kind of called this a rule, and I credit this to a master cooperator, Adam Schwartz, who's with the Cooperative Way, and he said in a presentation I saw years ago, he said, if you've seen one co-op, you've seen one co-op. And this was really sticky for me because it's so true, and what it means to me is that there's no one right way, and every co-op that you visit and explore a little bit has different ways of doing the same things. There's a lot of variability from one co-op to another, and here in the world of data management is no exception. In fact, it's probably the one area where I see in my work the most variability from one store to another in terms of the tools that co-ops are using, how they're using them. So this just sort of kind of opens up the disclaimer that I want to present, which is that we're not going to be making any recommendations here, because at the moment there really is no one right way. There's no one proper tool to use. So we won't be making suggestions, but we do want to introduce options, provide some background and some information that hopefully can help you get a jump start on your own research and your own process at your startup co-op.
All right.
So that's sort of our disclaimer. So yeah, I think one of the first most important questions really is, when are we considering this topic? When in our process as a startup do we want to start figuring out what tools we're going to be using now and as we grow into the future? And the answer is a little complicated.
Just like all the other stages of your development for your co-op. There's no clear and obvious time to start this. but the answer is usually yesterday.
Correct. Correct. So all that blue stuff, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, you're actually going to be using these tools throughout every stage of your co-op's development, starting at stage 1. And really, you want to be thinking about this ideally before you've actually started selling shares in your store. And we'll touch on that a little bit. There's a couple ways where you can kind of just dip your toe a little bit. Spreadsheets are one example that we see a lot, where people are just like, oh, we've got our first 20 members in an Excel spreadsheet. And and you know, if you ask us, you know, that's fine for now.
That's fine when it's 20, but a little bit not ideal when it's 2,000.
Exactly. You will outgrow a spreadsheet pretty quickly, but we do think that's a fine place to start, and it's a good way to grow into something more robust, because you'll be able to take your data that's in a spreadsheet and hopefully import it into something newer and bigger and better.
And it's interesting to think, as you go through these stages of development, you'll have different tools available to you. You know, when you are planning a co-op, or, you know, working from that organizing group, you might not have access to what track these things for you. You might not even have the same email addresses for people. So as you grow, different levels of tools become accessible. So it's, remember that what you do today might not be what you're doing years from now, and to keep things simple in your process so that you can grow it to different systems.
Yeah, for sure. That will be a recurring theme, I think, for today's webinar. So the next topic on our list was specifically what kinds of data are we talking about? And so this is actually, you know, can be very broad. Start with the basics: contact list. You know, you need a place to store people's names and phone numbers, addresses, and so forth. Additionally, you'll want to be able to track their equity investments in your store, in your cooperative rather, and this, you know, this is going to be probably the first place where you'll find that a spreadsheet stops being really helpful, is when someone, you know, one member makes their second share payment, and then all of a sudden the spreadsheet kind of falls apart. Volunteers, you know, people that are going to help you with your outreach efforts, tabling, and that sort of thing, and you'll want to have a way to track what their areas of interest are. How does each individual want to contribute to the startup effort? People with graphic design skills, or people with marketing background, or legal, financial skills, etc. This is another useful one. Can be direct mail redemption, or promotions. You can track whether they came back. Like, did we send out a coupon or a postcard or something, and did this member actually redeem that? And that can be really useful later on, and it helps gauge engagement. Patronage dividends. The member management system can be a great centralized place to store patronage in the business, and patronage benefits down the line. Social media engagement is one that you'll see, like in just kind of a standard CRM tool. They'll have a place for you to track, or to enter in somebody's Facebook page or their Twitter handle, and kind of let you tie in social media tools that way. Helps for doing really well-targeted promotions. Other basic stuff: membership status, changes in their status, etc. You want to have a way to see the history member number 3 was active up until, May of last year. Things like that. Hopefully member number 3 is paid in full. Forms and waivers and things like that. Now this is a little more advanced as well, but you may want to be able to track whether or not somebody has read and signed off on your privacy policy, or they read the membership pamphlet, things like that.
I thought of an example this morning that didn't make it to the slide related to membership forms, but if you are planning on doing membership tiers for either seniors or veterans or households with low income or needs for food access, and you are basing that off of an existing form or document that that person would provide, that's another thing to track. Or if you're in the developing stages and you're considering some of these discount types, maybe record whether or not that person might be interested in that in the future.
Good one, John. Yeah, and also that's data that's going to be extra useful for you down the line when you have a brick and mortar store, and perhaps you want to be able to offer those like esteemed citizen discounts, for example, or or like a food for all program. Yeah, so that's really useful. So again, we're kind of talking about storing data, capturing information that may not be super helpful today, but 3 years from now, 5 years from now, when you have a store and a POS, you're going to be so grateful that you made all those volunteers spend time entering that data. And just a quick note at the bottom there, the one thing that we never want to store in our database or really anywhere is credit card data. So we'll just throw that out there. Something to think about now, and will again come into play later when you've got a POS and have to deal with things like payment card industry compliance, or PCI compliance. So we covered the what, and so next up is how. How are we collecting all this stuff, or where, or kind of what are the streams, the data streams that are coming into our member management tool here, and those can come from lots of different places. Forms, the forms that people fill out at your tabling events. Maybe you have an online form for joining the co-op.
You can send out, if you have an email mailing list, you can send out a questionnaire using a Google form or SurveyMonkey, or using a third-party service that's either free or low cost. If you're doing tabling or going out to events or community spaces, it's often a good idea to find someone who has a little bit of Microsoft Office skills, just to make, one little printout with 20 copies of it, so it's at least consistent and you're providing the same information over and over again, instead of volunteer table one event coming back with a handwritten list of notes, having another volunteer go to a different event, coming back with a different list of notes, and trying to merge that data.
Right. Yeah. POS prompt. So yeah, a couple times in this presentation we'll talk to about making use of tools that are POS based, and just to we're talking about the point of sale system, your cash register system at your current or eventual food co-op store. So make sure we all know what POS is. I know it has other interpretations, which we won't go over. So that was the what, and we're going to move on to how. And I guess I should explain this graphic a little bit. But this is a bedrock principle of data management that I will share with you all, because it doesn't just apply to database administration. This applies to so much. This applies to life, really. But it's garbage in, garbage out. And that means that if you are putting bad data into your database or your member management tool or your spreadsheet, you will get bad data out of it. When you want to report, when you want to make a mailing list, when you want to get something from that data that you've been collecting, if you're not being diligent about entering it in thoroughly, accurately, properly, then when you run that report or pull that list, it will be unreliable and faulty and annoying. So that's garbage in, garbage out, and I really can't stress enough the importance of kind of adhering to this principle and teaching it to the people that will be touching your database, the volunteers, member management staff, whomever. It's really important. We'll talk a little bit about training in a little bit, but I wanted to preface the how with garbage in, garbage out. Learn it, live it. Oh, I thought we had another how. Oh, that's okay. John, did you have anything else on how or why garbage in, garbage out is so great?
You know, it's just little things like writing the date in a consistent manner. You don't want to, because this is a multi-year process for a lot of groups, and you don't want to sit there wondering if member number 5 joined in 2015 or 2016 down the road. So just little consistent things like that, and being mindful of what you might need later on.
Yeah, and we'll talk about just creating a convention, as we call it. So like John mentioned, the dates. Let's have a date convention where we, and the hopefully the proper tools will create some consistency with this. So you have some tool and it just kind of formats the date in the way we want to store it. Spreadsheets don't always do that, but some of these more advanced database tools that we'll look at do help out a lot with that.
Mm-hmm.
The who. This one is really important, and again, we are not making any recommendations. This is a real list of real people from co-ops that I've talked to and worked with. When asked like who built this tool that you are using or limping along on, and these are some of the answers that I will get from startup co-ops, and it's funny to me because the volunteer is the most common one. We have a member who's a database administrator, or we have a board member who's good with computers, and they built this thing for us. And I will say that 50% of the time that works out great for that co-op, and then the other 50% of the time that was a big fail. And so there's no, I'm not here to say don't ask your 15-year-old niece to build this for you. But the issue that happens time and again is like that really helpful volunteer or board member who built this great tool for you is now gone. They moved on. They're not around. They're not available. They've moved.
And despite their good intentions, they did not leave behind instructions or notes about what they were doing. It's all too common, not just for member management, but for a lot of positions that you'll find in your startup group. So just like you would want to develop the GM position or the manager positions in a way that is forward thinking and thinking about the longevity of the co-op, when you make this decision, you want to have the similar kind of thought process about what is the long-term plan for this.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the thesis of this topic. Really, is we want to avoid what I call the alien conundrum, because I like getting beamed up by aliens better than being hit by a bus. But imagine that person is beamed up by aliens and they're just no longer available. And now what do? We need to have documentation. We need to have some accountability for the person who built the thing. And sometimes that means you need to hire somebody and pay them money in order to have that accountability. But we want to avoid having all of the knowledge about the inner workings of this tool stored in one person's brain. So let's try and get that out.
Use a buddy system. Use a buddy system that's 3 people. Spreading the knowledge across more than just one person's responsibility not only makes their job easier, but it gives you a little bit of redundancy in the operation, and it allows one person to leave if that's what happens.
Yeah, and I would say that it's not institutional knowledge if only one person knows it. And so this is part of your institution. You want to make sure that it's not trapped in one person's head. Documentation, the buddy system, as John mentioned, are ways to kind of work around that or to avoid that trap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sometimes the weirdo from Craigslist works out, but then 50% of the time it does not. So great, we've gotten to the which.
Yeah, this is the interesting part where we start to name names.
Yeah, we're going to name some names, and we're going to go through a few of these individually, and just kind of talk about them. These are things that startup co-ops are using, and some are using some to great effect, and some less so. And we'll just kind of talk through them pretty quickly. We don't want to spend a ton of time, because I think we could spend a lot of time going through these. The generic CRM at the bottom, I mentioned 3, that there's probably 300. So it is a very deep pool we're swimming in. But yeah, let's look at a couple of these, just one at a time. Nation Builder is one you might have heard of if you're in the startup organizing world. And this is another one that came out of political organizing, and has since grown to encompass more sectors. It costs money, which sometimes turns people off right away. But it does combine a bunch of tools that you will need all into one nice little package. It combines the CRM. It has a way for you to accept payment through the tool. It does your email blasts and helps you manage your email campaigns. And it includes a website, which every co-op is going to need. So that's can be appealing to have all that stuff under one roof. And I know, one of the kind of dings against something like Nation Builder that's sort of what I call an off-the-shelf or out-of-the-box solution. It's sort of it's designed to be ready to go. Is that it's sometimes not ready to go for what you need it to do, and so may require some customization, and that's true of kind of all of these. But we'll look at there's a spectrum. Some of these are much more customizable than others. But Nation Builder is a popular tool and can be effective, if employed properly or well. What's next on our list here? Oh yeah, this is a good one. We hear that we get questions about this a lot. This is Civi CRM. Civi CRM came out of well, the civil, like city and state. I forget where it originated, but it was designed for managing kind of governmental level contact information. It's an open source tool, which some people will adore about the tool.
And Civi CRM was used by a lot of nonprofits as well, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it is free. I put an ish at the end there, and I'll touch on that a little bit. But it is incredibly customizable. This is not an off-the-shelf or an out-of-the-box solution. You can download it, you can install it on your computer, or you can install it on your web server. But what you get is pretty basic. In order to make Civi CRM work for you as a startup co-op, it's going to require some customization. And what that means is it's going to require somebody to do that customization, and that might not be you. So you might need to find somebody in your community or pay somebody to do that customization to make it, to be able to leverage this, a very powerful tool for your needs. That's the free-ish component is yeah, you don't have to pay any money, but it might cost you, if not in dollars, in hours of time spent setting it up, customizing it. So we'll throw that out there because it is a very popular tool and it's one that we get asked about a lot. And those are sort of my caveats about it. It's great, powerful, flexible, extensible, but you got to know how to play with it.
It's a very robust software package, but robust also in the way that you've mentioned, where it is complicated and sometimes hard to use.
Yeah, that's robust in this sense is a double-edged sword, for sure. And so let's see, what do we got next here? Great.
So people might be more familiar with good old Microsoft Access.
Absolutely. This one's been around for ages. And a lot of mature co-ops are using Microsoft Access databases. This is a very, very common tool that we see in a lot of going concerns. And it's very powerful for what it is. And along the lines of Civi CRM, very customizable. If you have somebody, or if you yourself have the expertise to build Microsoft Access databases, then this can be a great option.
And where a lot of co-ops, kind of keep coming back to this is that you'll have staff that is familiar working with Microsoft Access from a previous job experience or workplace. So it can be a familiar tool for your limited set of resources, your limited set of human skills that you have in your group. So if you do have people who are familiar with Access, it becomes a more enticing choice.
Yeah. So some of the dings that I will just mention for Access, and FileMaker is also mentioned here. FileMaker would be the sort of the Mac analog for Microsoft Access. They're costly. Each computer that's going to access this tool needs to have a copy of Microsoft Office.
And not your work's copy. You're going to need your own copy.
So that can quickly add up if people don't already have those softwares. Yeah, like I mentioned, it is very customizable. The other thing that can work against these types of tools, these sort of software-based tools, is they're less easy to share and collaborate on than some of these other web-based or cloud-based tools. The data kind of lives on a machine somewhere, and you need access to that machine, or it needs to be on a central server somewhere, which then again requires a little more expertise.
Imagine a situation where you've developed this Microsoft Access database, but it's just on one person's laptop, and that person's out of town, or it needs to be two places at once. It doesn't scale that way.
Exactly. That being said, both of these are great tools. Great. We mentioned spreadsheets early on, and we'll bring it back up here. Google Sheets, or Google Docs, as it's formerly known, Microsoft Excel. So we, as we mentioned at the beginning, these are okay to start. You will find out quickly that they're limited, and it's not going to scale up very well as your co-op just mushrooms.
But I was going to say, the majority of these projects probably do start off on an Excel document, or now a Google Doc, and it's okay to get you going, to start and building something. It's perfectly good to open up an Excel document or a Google Doc and share it out with a couple of people to get it going quickly. The barrier to use with these tools is very low.
Yeah. Almost everybody is familiar with a spreadsheet and doesn't run away screaming when you show them a spreadsheet. Sometimes a database can be a little overwhelming.
But it's one step above having a pile of papers on someone's desk that are just sitting there,
Yes. Let's advocate right here and say that storing your member data on Post-it notes is not good.
Please don't do it.
We weren't making recommendations. We were just going to present information, but here I am saying, don't do this. Don't store your critical member data on paper. Yeah, have paper copies, but yeah.
Key them into something.
So if I could jump in just a second, a few of you have already sent in questions. I want to thank you. We will take those at the end. This is a live webinar. If you're watching right now, you can send in your questions at info@fci.coop. info@fci.coop. And John and Joel will take those at the end of the session.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Yeah, and actually we're nearing that end right now. We were just going to kind of go over our list one more time from earlier. So we covered City and Nation Builder, spreadsheets, and Access. So there's just a couple others that we'll touch on briefly. Wild Apricot and Salsa Labs are two other tools that I've come across that do essentially the same thing that Nation Builder does. They are that sort of combined CRM, mailing list tool, fundraising tool. These are both popular in the nonprofit fundraising realm. So I'll mention these as ones to consider if you're evaluating some options. We mentioned some POS-based tools. This is going to be further down the road when you have a point of sale system, but you may want to look towards having a member management tool that is very tightly integrated with that point of sale system, because you're going to be getting eventually you're going to be getting data from the POS because somebody's going to be at the register buying a share. And you want that data to flow really nicely into your tool so that it's all tracked.
Right.
So, and certain point of sale systems have that capability. Not all of them do. We'll mention the DIY or the homebrew solution, which I've seen a few of these, and you know, sometimes they work out great. But this is, you know, this is your niece who built a web app for you, for example, to store all this information in, and it's written in code and databases, and so there's a few of these floating around out there. Some of them are, yeah, some of them are great, but they do, you may suffer from some of the pitfalls that we mentioned with the sort of institutional knowledge, the alien conundrum. And then there's the, you know, the person who knows everything about how this works is not available when you need them most.
Yeah.
And then just a generic CRM, and there's we highlight a few of them here. Highrise, Salesforce, and Insightly are just three popular ones to consider. These are those off-the-shelf solutions that may require a little bit of customization, but they allow for that. So if you're looking for something that you can kind of just sign up for online and start using, these three might be ones to consider.
Yeah, I would just add, you know, the point of sale-based member management is where a lot of co-ops end up down the road, but don't let the lack of a point of sale prevent you from starting on managing your member data. You know, it's really jumping out too far. You're going to need to develop this tool well before you open a brick and mortar store. So just consider that.
Which segues beautifully into our next slide. How do we choose and evaluate amongst all of these options we've just dumped on you? Again, your needs will grow and change. It's okay if you need to switch midstream, or you outgrow your first tool and move into your second tool. And that's okay. And if you can plan for those things in advance, that's even better. Like John just said, we don't want you to fixate too much on what you're using. Like, don't wait until you have the perfect tool with every single field that you need to be there before you start entering data. Just start using something. Even if it's a spreadsheet, start writing it down somewhere, and then we can, you know, you'll be able to export that data and import it and grow with that data. But don't get too hung up on the what. And evaluate options. This is really important. It's important not to just sort of pick the first thing that came up, but I'd say give 2 or 3 different options a fair shake, and maybe sign up for some online free trials for a couple weeks. Most online tools offer that option. And if you find something that you're just delighted with and it's fun and easy to use, but it costs money, then pay the money. This is going to be a really foundational tool for your organization. And if employed properly, will help you make money. So don't be shy. I know a lot of co-ops that are like, oh, we want something that's free because we have no money. But you do have some capital, and this is not a bad place to spend your limited capital right now. Have a plan for support. We've touched on this a couple times now. Have a plan for failure. But yeah, whether or not it's the individual who built the tool, have some documentation, have a phone number to call in an emergency. You know, if something stops working in the middle of a fevered fundraising pitch, you know, because that's when it will stop working if it does, then you want to have a plan so that you can sort of minimize panic and get something, get a solution in place, or have a backup plan ready. And yeah, and like we say here, have a plan for failure. Sadly, technology does fail sometimes. As a technologist, it's hard for me to admit that, but it's true. And the training. The training is really important, and it's good to create systems around this. So, for example, you know, for onboarding volunteers, when you're bringing new, you know, if you do something like a volunteer orientation, include a little bit about how we're entering data and how we're tracking things and how it's getting used, so that people aren't just, you know, entering phone numbers in the address field. Or
kind of the last one might be also just talk to people. You know, if there's another co-op in your community, ask them what they're doing, what they did when they were starting up. If there's not a co-op in your community, reach out to the Food Co-op Initiative, send us at the tech support an email. You know, we can help be bridges to other people who have gone through this before.
Yeah, and that's actually our last slide. Jacqueline, you mentioned you've got a couple of questions, so now
I do. All right, so the first one is an opportunity to restate what you said. It said never save credit card data, but we do auto payments for shares, and we have been taking credit card data. You want to address that?
Yeah, we could address that. Well, I mean, it depends a little bit on how you're doing that. I think the ideal way to do sort of like a recurring payment would be like an ACH, where you take check and routing number, but that can also be done through like a debit card. I think, to clarify what we said earlier, you shouldn't be storing that information. That shouldn't be a field in your spreadsheet. Right. If you're using like PayPal to collect data, to collect payments and to do recurring payments, that's fine. That's fine. Let PayPal deal with the security. They have the security infrastructure to deal with that. But you do not, and that does create a security risk and a liability for you having that data in your possession. So if you have a payment gateway that you're working with and people are like plugging their credit card information into that, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, so on a couple of the bigger solutions like Nation Builder, the co-op member might have a little account portal where they're entering their credit card information in. And that's fine, because then you're having the third-party host take care of that security issue.
So don't enter it into spreadsheets, people. Please use something that's meant for that.
Yes.
And I'll also just mention too, don't even write it on a piece of paper. You'll come across this when you get to a store and you have to sign up for credit card for a merchant processing service, and you have to certify your store as PCI compliant. But there are rules about what you can and can't do with credit card information and where you can and can't put that. So even if you're taking a payment over the phone, you can't jot it down on your notepad and then type it into your payment gateway or your or QuickBooks or however you're processing those over the phone. Those have to go directly into that, either it's a web page or it's QuickBooks, whoever is processing that payment. Having a hard copy or a paper copy of that is also a liability and poor practice. So that's part of the training, and you'll really bump up against that more when you have a store and have to go through the really, really fun and exciting process of PCI compliance.
Good. We had someone say, So someone on our team wants to use Civi, and but they're the only tech-savvy person on our team. So we have doubts about doing that. It seems like that knowledge would be trapped in one person. Can a lay person learn this?
Good question. Good question. John, you want to take it?
I've never had the opportunity to try to learn Civi myself. I have, seen non-tech savvy people be able to use it. That's a tough question for your group.
I would say that that's not, on the face of it, a bad solution. But think about what we were talking about earlier. Have documentation that that person needs to document how to add a field to this form or things like that, or how to directly manipulate data if there's something that was entered poorly and it breaks.
If
So
the person who is very pro Civi CRM is a decent educator and able to lead other individuals into Civi CRM knowledge, it might work out.
Yeah, I don't think that you should throw out the consideration entirely, but make sure, like, have conditions, like, okay, let's move forward with this, or make a proposal and show us how great this is. And if you or your board or whoever decides to move forward with it, make sure there's support. Make sure there's documentation. Make sure you know how to get a hold of that person. If they leave, make sure they hook you up with their successor. So just have a plan. That's all. Not everybody in the organization needs to be a database administrator and know how to monkey with it. I will say it's not terribly difficult to go into Civi and customize it yourself, even if you're not a super whiz on technology. But yeah, have a plan.
Okay. We actually use Civi here at FCI. I am not tech savvy. It took half an hour training for me to really be able to cruise around and do what I needed to do, but we do have a person who's in charge of making all the changes, who knows more of what they're doing, like to major spreadsheet, if we're going to change what data we're collecting and stuff. So yeah, I would say it actually is something you can get very comfortable with as a lay person, as long as the person who's setting you up can train. So, and it is practically free or free.
That's cool to hear that it's working out really well for FCI.
I am really, probably for my age group, very tech unsavvy, and yeah, it is working out. So another question someone had, okay, toy with the tech unsavvy, she said, there is no one on our board or volunteers who is any good at tech, and spreadsheets are becoming unwieldy. It's not working anymore. What's the next step up for the least tech savvy?
Where to go from your spreadsheet? Yeah, I think at that point you're probably looking at going back to our list of options to choose, and here, I can even put it back up. No, I can't. Going back to your list and starting a process of evaluating some of them. Look at them, and especially, it's great if you're not a tech savvy individual, then it's great to be a part of that process of evaluating, because then you can look at the tool and use it a little bit, click around on it, and you may see that it's actually really kind of nice and friendly to use. Some of them are.
And that's also a situation where you might consider a little bit of paid support for something like Civi CRM. or these other tools like Nation Builder.
Mm-hmm. No, really good point.
Absolutely.
That did lead to a question about Nation Builder. Well, first off, they said, we just got notice that Nation Builder's price is going way up. Didn't know if you'd heard about that, and we're wondering if you'd heard that.
No, I have not. The last I checked, they were charging a roughly $20 per month for a pretty basic plan that should work for a single startup co-op.
Okay.
But I haven't heard any news of them raising that.
It might depend on how advanced the tools are that you guys are using at your co-op too, and their price. But we get the feeling that we're not getting everything out of Nation Builder. And when we talk to their support people, they don't really seem to understand co-ops and what we're trying to do. Any advice is that when we should reach out to you?
It may be a good time to reach out to us, but I do think this is actually a good question, because it raises a really important point of that evaluation process that we're discussing, which is actually getting in touch with the vendor and talking to them. Because if you're going to be paying for a web-based tool, they're going to be your go-to for support, and if their support is terrible, that's something to consider in your evaluation process. So really, and I like to do this when I'm doing this process for any business, for any kind of tool, is call up the provider, make up some questions if need be, but how easy is it to get in touch with a human being? How friendly and helpful is that human being when you do talk to them? And also email, sending them emails, and how responsive are they? That it is a very important part of the evaluation process, and should be a factor in your final decision for sure. Yeah, I just quickly Googled Nation Builder pricing. I didn't see any news about raising the rates, but doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah, and good.
Oh, I was just going to say, a lot of these companies will present one price, but don't be afraid to talk to that sales team and try to negotiate something that works for your business.
We actually have heard reports from startups that they have negotiated, this was a year or two ago, but they have negotiated lower prices at a Nation Builder. So definitely take John's advice on that. Another Civi CRM question came in. Well, there are questions still pouring in here. Does the Civi CRM site have manuals to describe how to customize their sites, and does it require any specific type of code or coding experience?
Right. Yeah. So Civi CRM is, because it's such a popular tool. There's a lot of information, so you can very easily go online, go on their site. They'll link you to manuals and guides and tutorials, and that's all really helpful information. And I like tutorials. I like the hands-on thing. Some people like manuals. But definitely you'll want to read up on it a little bit and just get a sense of like, oh, okay, how do if I want to reconfigure this in this certain way, let's just Google it, basically. As for the coding aspect of it, I would say no. Almost generally 98% of the time, no. No coding would be required to use Civi CRM. There is a vast world of plugins and add-ons that other people have already coded, that you can just kind of install. And so you'll definitely want to leverage those add-ons for Civi. So unless you're doing something really new and interesting, you probably don't need to code your own add-ons for Civi CRM.
Okay. Another group. So we're using a combination of Google for Business and Dropbox. What we like about this is we can see in Dropbox who's utilizing what. Is this a solution that can get us all the way to the POS, or are we fooling ourselves?
I think you can get to the POS with that. We didn't talk about Dropbox, but Dropbox is a tool that businesses of all size use, and it's a good complement for Google. So that's my vote. Yes, you could make it.
I think the challenge that we've heard from a lot of startups about using that solution, and I don't know if any of them have gotten to the end game with that or not, but a lot have started there, is just that keeping your board and your key volunteers and staff knowing where what is, if it's in Google Docs or if it's Dropbox, and if it's in Dropbox, are you editing in Dropbox or did you download it and then load a new version? So it, for those of us who are less tech savvy, it's much more attractive, but it can cause its own problems. So just, if John says you can get to the end that way, that's awesome. I believe him. But that is the common problem we hear, is that people have a hard time keeping track of where's what and staying on the same page. Nation Builder is really popular because if you can get everyone trained up on it, everything is in one place. So different challenges. All right. Oh, one more. Okay. So we're at owner loan very soon. Which of these systems can we, which of these systems, how can we integrate owner loan data, which seems to be really complex when we need separate spreadsheets?
This is a trickier one because when it comes to things like capital campaigns, there's a lot of variation from state to state in terms of what you need to track and what you need to report for tax purposes and things like that. So this may be where you're kind of dipping your toe in the customization world, but it certainly would be easy enough to add in the necessary fields that you need to track to pretty much anything that we're talking about here, from spreadsheet to all the way to something, your homebrew solution or city CRM, etc. But yeah, you will need to be looking you'd be looking into the future to be able to have something that lets you report out the data that you need for your own tax purposes, and then for the individuals, for the folks who kindly lent you their money.
I'll put this out here as maybe back as an open question, but would a simple version of QuickBooks start to become appropriate at that level?
Oh, I would say so. Certainly, I know mature co-ops that are using QuickBooks to do like patronage, dividend tracking, and history and stuff like that.
Yeah, so there's QuickBooks and Wave and probably a number of competitors in that space, and they would probably offer a little bit more of a financial tracking that you could complement against your spreadsheets or Civi CRM list.
I'm just going to mention to folks, I'm absolutely for financial tracking. Most of you I know the vast majority of you that we talk to are using QuickBooks. Absolutely, that information should be there. But if you're talking about the kinds of spreadsheets that have been in some of our previous webinars with Katie Novak about managing your actual campaign, where you're trying to see, you have a large volunteer team trying to see who's committed what and when, that has consistently been a problem if it's not in Google Docs. So it depends on what we're tracking. If you're tracking an active campaign, you need an active updating spreadsheet that a lot of people can utilize. That's different than your long-term data. Okay.
Right. Great explanation.
Yeah.
All right. That's the last of our questions, gentlemen. So I'm going to wrap this up. I want to thank Joel Brock and John Purdy again from the Tech Support Cooperative. Their contact information is there on the screen. You see their email addresses as well as their phone number. If you have any questions, please do reach out to them. And we want to just let you know, we didn't have a slide in time, but Tuesday, January 17th at 4 p.m. Central, we will have our next webinar, which will be Deb Troca of the Indiana Cooperative Development Center, talking to all of us about what's new and exciting and unique at Up and Coming 2017, the big Startup Food Co-op Conference happening March 9th and 10th. So we'll see you for that on Tuesday, January 17th at 4 p.m. Central Time. Thank you again to Joel and John for joining us today.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.